Hi, in this demo we'll take a quick look at how to parse invoices using DocumentPro. So we'll start by just bringing in an invoice. Okay, let's take a look at this invoice. Right, so this invoice has a first page, which is the invoice itself, but it also has a second and third page, which is a different document, not the invoice. So we'd only want to parse the first invoice. So for this demo, let's see what we want to extract from this invoice. Let's say we want the vendor name, the vendor GST number, the invoice date, as well as the invoice number, which is right here, tax invoice number, the invoice total, as well as the line item. So let's stick with that. So let's click on parse document. Now we'd want to select a invoice, but for this demo, let's create a new parser. Now we can create a parser from scratch, or we can choose a template. So let's use the invoice template, and we'll give this one a name, demo invoice parser. This document does contain tables. Let's use the GPT-4 model. Okay, so we want to get rid of a few fields that we don't need extracted. So purchase order number, invoice due date, payment terms, currency, tax amount, invoice tax rate, subtotal, buyer name, buyer address, and buyer VAT name. We want the line item fields. Let's add a GST number. So seller GST number to the right of seller name. Excellent. Let's create this parser. Okay, so now we want to apply our parser to the invoice that we uploaded. So let's select the demo invoice parser, and we only want to apply it to the first page. We'll use the GPT-4 model. Let's apply this. Okay, so let's wait for this to complete. There we go. Okay, so that's our extraction. We have our invoice date, the invoice number, invoice total amount. We have our line item information, as well as our seller GST number and the seller name. So this looks good. Let's confirm this. We can also download this invoice result. So let's download to CSV, single row, download the results. And so now we have a CSV extract of the results. Now let's take a look at another example where we have more invoices, utility bills, but we don't know which parsers to apply to them. So what we have here is a waste management utility bill and another vendor's utility bill, Republic Services. So these are both utility bills for waste management. We have two separate parsers for them. So we have one for waste management and we have one for Republic Services that we created earlier, but we don't know which vendor each invoice belongs to. So we first need to apply some kind of classification parser to know which parser to apply afterwards. So let's create a vendor classification parser. So we'll just create a custom parser, vendor classification. This is an invoice document. We'll use the GPT-4 model. Next, let's add a field, vendor name. Okay, let's create this parser. Now what we'd want to do is apply the vendor classification parser to both these documents. So vendor classification, just apply it to the first page. Let's do the same for the Republic services. Okay, so now we've applied the vendor classification parser, and this would be helpful if you are trying to create a document workflow using our API. So let's see the results for the vendor classification of the Republic service and the waste management invoices. Right. So we know what vendor this invoice is for, and we know what vendor this invoice is for as well. So once you have that information through an API, then you could apply additional parsers. So for the waste management one, now that we know for sure that this is a waste management utility bill, you can apply the waste management parser to it. And for the Republic Services one, you can apply the Republic Services parser to it, which you had prepared before. And the reason to have two different invoices would be if they had different structures or different information within them that you would want to extract. So now that we've applied these parsers, we can take a look at the results. So this is our waste management utility bill, and it contains extracts of the utility bill, including the details of service, and similarly, we can check out the results for the Republic Services utility bill. Contains all the different line items as well as payments and adjustments, and these are things that we would have defined in our parser as things to extract. So that marks the end of this demo. I hope this was useful.